Matin Kim is the brand dominating Korean streetwear that you've never heard of. And it's their own fault. This video explores how they dominated above anyone else within the Korean market, and perhaps more importantly, how, despite their incredible heft in Korea, they failed to succeed in the West. So to begin this video, I want to cut through a lot of the misinformation online about the foundation of the business. Probably sounds silly if you don't know the brand, but believe me when I say this is very, very necessary, as it's shocking how misinformed the information about the brand is online. So just very quickly, let's establish an early timeline. The founder Kim Da-in was born in 1992. She left high school in 2014 according to her own interview from 중앙일보, which would have meant that she's 4 years late leaving high school and did not study in Berlin or America, as many news sites in Korean seem to believe that she was. She also didn't study fashion, which is another misconception. The following year, inspired by her then-boyfriend, Park Moon-soo, who was the CEO and founder of his own brand, The Museum Visitor, she decided to start her own business. This was catalyzed because he needed to go off to do his mandatory military service, so she began working on Matin Kim in the winter of 2015. Now, a lot of sources seem to believe that she began this venture with a blog, similarly founded in 2015. However, it seems either that that's just completely not true, or that it's now deleted, because instead, in the same interview with 중앙일보, which is by far and away the best history that we have on the brand, she more explicitly mentions that it was her Instagram where the initial interest in the brand came from. She'd amassed a following after posting consistently since 2010, and so seemingly accidentally was launching this new brand, Matin Kim, as an influencer brand. She said, quote, "At the time, all I had was 60,000 won, which is about $40. Dongdaemun required at least 2 of the same design. So instead of the fancy 150,000 won, about $100 design I wanted, I chose 2 cheap jumpers priced at 20,000 to 30,000 won, about $15 to $20, and posted them on my blog. They didn't sell." Jumper in this context is Konglish. It refers to a bomber jacket. Personally, I think she's being hyperbolic because her Instagram shows her flying all over the world at the same time when she only had 60,000 won. It's a bit sketchy. But regardless, it was with this failure that she went to her parents, who offered her an initial 300,000 won, which is about $200, capital to buy 2 better quality jumpers within the same market, Dongdaemun, which is like the garment manufacturing mecca of Korea. She never really explains if these secondary jumpers sold, but we can assume that they did, as from here the brand would establish almost suspiciously fast. This is because with limited means, the brand utilized private labeling to expand. Private labeling here is the act of taking an already made garment from somewhere like Dongdaemun Market and attaching a brand name to it. This is the bread and butter of Dongdaemun Market, and it is wildly popular amongst Korean brands as it best serves the Korean people. In fact, my translator for the Korean channel laid it out best when he said that the Korean audience primarily looks for just 2 things: the label and the price. There's almost no comparative consideration for things like design credibility within the Korean market compared to the West, which is why so many Korean brands look uncomfortably similar to something somebody else has already done to a Western eye. Simply, these designs are not for us. They're for a market that actively desires private label products, or at least very similar product offerings to popular styles, from brands that they are already emotionally attached to. For Matin Kim, this meant that they first would expand into t-shirts in July 2016, which is something most brands private label anyway. And then in August, they expanded into shoes, which I can attest were already a very, very, very popular style in Korea at the time. They were already in the underground markets. This style was, as the French say, l'established. But that was the selling point. They were inoffensive shoes from a popular Instagram creator. Of course, it's unclear if she knew that this was the value of the shoes at the time, but they were sold essentially like merchandise. And it was extremely successful. Literally from the first post of shipping the shoes on September 25th, 2016, they already had international attention from Korean people in America. So clearly, there was something to be made from her Insta fame. KT News says that this first batch of shoes was 200 pieces. I honestly can't confirm this as the article is rife with other inaccuracies, but regardless, you can see from these photos just how many pairs of shoes that she had purchased, and they were even restocked the following year because of high demand. Considering that at this point, the only promotion they had was her own Instagram page, this is a notable success for a small business. By 2018, the company was incorporated as Matin Kim. In Korean, the brand is pronounced Matin Kim and is often noted to be a little strange by Korean sites as a name, but psychologically is something which would have helped with the brand positioning as a mid-luxury label, which is a trouble that she repeats was quite difficult in the beginning. However, despite this, literally in April 2018, less than 2 years after launching the brand entirely, they had their first pop-up store in a mall called Lotte in Jamshil. Now, this is a very, very expensive retail space, so it's suspicious how she funded this, especially considering thus far all we know unequivocally about the brand is that she sold these boots, and now in Jamshil, she had a full product range. Shirts, t-shirts, trousers, jeans, accessories, shoes, all for sale within the mall. Yes, it's all also privately labeled from Dongdaemun Market and sold on branding alone, not quality, not design credibility, but it's still suspicious how much of a jump this was. I did explicitly ask Kim Da-in about how on earth they afforded this location via email, because it was next to Golden Goose, Burberry, Gucci within the mall, so it's an incredible feat to have this space, but she tactically avoided the question by not replying to my email. Also, I believe it is at this time that the production moved from Korea to China specifically for the shoes, as she does admit in an interview that that did happen, but I also happen to know several people that are involved in shoe manufacturing in Korea, and I don't recognize this style of insole as from Korea. So it's not impossible, but I do suspect it's around this time that they moved production to China. And why not? China is cheaper and can produce a more accurate stock count for situations like this, where they're planning to sell in waves. Remember that this is not a design-led brand, this is a branding-led brand. Very clearly so. So this takes the brand into the realm of using promotion to add value to the brand equity while using cheap production to keep margins wide, at approximately 28%, reinvesting that profit back into the business for different products that just catch their eye from whatever their factories had for offer. This saw them, still in 2018, hire their first designer on the team, secure a website as a shopping platform, and even collaborate with her boyfriend for a Matin Kim / the museum visited jacket, which saw horrific reviews online for being defective. On top of being basically a dupe of either the Dolce & Gabbana Autumn/Winter 15 collection, sorry for mentioning them, or the many different Marni tote bags, which I think started in 2010 but were popularized in 2014, the real problem was that the color in the print would run when washed. It was so bad that they actually recalled the jackets for a full refund from this scandal alone. Other negative reviews also began around the same time about product quality, including one Naver blogger who wrote about a pair of best-selling boots, shown here, called the Span boots. They said, "I reordered them so many times I can't even count the number of times I've reordered them. I've exchanged them twice, I've received a defective item and thought the quality would have deteriorated significantly after reordering them. But that didn't seem to be the case, so I contacted them. They kindly asked me to provide more detailed information, so I sent it back to them." The blogger would then go on to explain that the quality may have been bad, but because they were so cheap, 113,000 won, they didn't really care. This is reiterated many times across several blogs and YouTube videos all around this time and even today in review of Matin Kim products. reiterating the fact that the Korean consumer is looking for those two things that my translator mentioned before: a brand name and a cheap price. And frankly, they were providing these two things in spades. Their community building on her Instagram page is often touted as the primary reason for their success, which frankly cannot be faulted if it's perfect for their target market. Is Matin Kim good design? No. Is it remotely creative? No. But does it fit their target market perfectly? Absolutely yes, and that's why it was successful. From here, coming into 2019, reviews note how product quality is slightly increasing. There's also some people that do disagree with that, but by and large, it seems that they're reacting to consumer demand well, feeding in to that community building, which really is the foundation of the brand. Prices on new styles can go up a bit, but no one complains. They collaborate with a brand called Plaque, who are equally a generic style, probably private labeled or cut and sew brand that is perfect for their target market, and they release a new hit style of bag called the Paris Middle bag. All of which really comes to hone their positive public perception as that brand that builds a great community. Based off of Dane's personal Instagram, you begin to see terms like European aesthetic, self-designed, and distinctive designs with meticulous attention to detail pop up both in Naver blogs, which are a wildly popular source of review in Korea, and on legitimate fashion retailing news sites. These things are not really true. The styles are basically dupes of other brands' designs at a lesser quality, so there's no meticulous attention to detail here. But that doesn't matter. If one, they are meeting the consumer needs, which they clearly are doing very phenomenally well, and two, if the customer believes those things to be true, which again they seem to believe. It might as well be my catchphrase at this point, but the truth doesn't matter. It's our perception of what is true that matters in retailing. And this is the perception of Matin Kim within Korea. So they maintained a mid-luxury positioning and branding for their audience exceptionally well, even as things like quality dropped. They really delivered on that added value for their customer in the way that they were asking for. TLDR, Matin Kim was listening. By that December, they were planning a global expansion, though they didn't say to where. This in fact would not be revealed until January 2020 when they announced the launch of a new secondary label called Kim Matin, which was aimed to be their more premium option geared specifically to a Western audience. And here is where they failed. They had a pre-fall showroom in early 2020, and thanks to their social media buzz from Korean audience, they became stocked on Essence from their first season alone. However, taking a look at their Instagram page, it's rather clear that none of these clothes were particularly new or interesting in design. They weren't outright dupes as we knew from their mainline, which is good for a European audience, but there's not much in this to capture a Western audience's attention comparatively to other brands that we're already associating this style with. You compare this to other Korean brands like Moon, Kim Kim, or Ryu & Viu, who present in either Paris or Milan, and you can see they all have much more experimental and interesting catwalk presentations to vie for that Western attention. They're also quite unique, each of these. Moon itself is not really popular within Korea, so their retail offering tends to reflect the Western audience more by maintaining that creative design for purchase. So it's creative catwalk, creative product. Kim Kim is much more popular in Korea, so tones their design style down in the retail offering drastically while using the Paris press to add value within that Korean market. And yet they still pander to the Paris press by having a very creative catwalk presentation while maintaining that Korean popular retail offering. And lastly, Ryu & Viu are a small brand that make modern clothing and shoes inspired by traditional Korean dress called hanbok. They present in Milan, have a creative promotional plan, a creative product offering, and they market themselves using that Korean heritage that's not all that popular among the Korean crowd, but which is best gearing them towards a Western audience. Their vision in both shoes, clothes, and ancillary products are well-defined, unique, and consistent. They may be small, but they've perfectly figured out how to vie for the target market that they have established. The reason that I bring up these examples is because these are 3 different ways to do business from Korean brands. Are they developing their brand image for a Western or Korean audience? This is important because without a clear target market, you cannot gear the marketing accurately. Unfortunately for Kim Matin, however, this was their big folly. They were actively targeting a Western audience with this brand. It's why it existed, they've reiterated it many times on Korean sites, but there was a disconnect between who they were targeting, the show itself, and then the products that followed. So in comparison to even their own mainline brand, Matin Kim, which definitely listened to its already established audience, Kim Matin absolutely didn't. It lasted only a single season, and they repeatedly say, even to this day, that they might bring it back from here on out. My advice to them if they do this is to gear it for a Korean audience. There's definitely space for a luxury branch of Matin Kim within the country, and I think if they do choose to do this, they'll be well advised to follow in the footsteps of brands like User, who do this very, very, very well. Korean promotion, Korean branding, unique enough to be a luxury and special product offering, but still perfect for the Korean audience. All of that said, the Matin Kim brand was not only continuing strongly in the face of Kim Matin's failure, but they were actually thriving within their home field because with these strong coronavirus regulations that were held in Korea, everyone was on their phones significantly more and increasingly discovering this cool new brand. The only issue was that now people were online more than ever, so came the criticisms. Explicitly, I'm talking about this Instagram account, which was founded in February 2020, that for all intents and purposes can only be considered a bashing site. They bring up 3 main complaints. 1, that Matin Kim dupes a lot of popular design styles. The second is that the working environment is particularly hostile. And 3, that they delete negative comments. For the first complaint, I feel like this is unfairly targeted. Yes, the brand is based on dupes. We know this. It's literally fast fashion. It's intended to dupe popular styles so that they are sold at a more reasonable price, quantity over quality. The second complaint was a major problem. The brand had been built on a parasocial relationship with Kim Da-in, and these reviews on third-party sites like Glassdoor contradict the public persona that she personally has built all through this time. It's especially damaging when you consider that in Korea, defamation is taken very, very seriously and can result in major fines or even prison time, as it's considered a criminal offense, even if what that person said is factually true. So for them to risk these reviews had weight, and it did damage the perception of both Kim Da-in the person and Matin Kim. However, it was the third criticism that became the real problem, as it affected her customers more directly. The brand actively had always promised community. That was the thing they were built on. They were promising to listen. So by deleting comments, they were proving that they are in fact not doing as promised, and destabilized the marketing foundation that the company was built on. It's not built on good product, so if the air of cool dissipates, this could really damage the company. And it did. By only March, this had become quite a major issue for the brand, and Kim Da-in had to be interviewed by KT News about how they were going to fix the problems they were having with quality and with customer service. To cut a long story short, she just kind of apologized, and they said they would prevent recurrences by, quote, reviewing and establishing internal and external systems, as well as completely revamping our service processes. As it is, I think the real issue with this was the fact that this is an influencer brand. She was selling well based on Kim Da-in, the influencer. So when that parasocial trust was broken, her customers felt betrayed. It's why this kind of small criticism became such a major scandal. Her customers felt betrayed. It's a major risk for any influencer brand, and clearly one that she fell victim to here in 2020, simultaneously as discovery and sales to new customers drove upwards in spades due to the pandemic. So despite this building criticism against those three things, Matin Kim was still growing very nicely, even to having their own online store hosted by Woo Shin-sa, the parent to Moo Shin-sa, which you may have heard of, and their fall bag became a bestseller almost instantly when they launched. They also started to expand into brick-and-mortar locations with the shop that she shared with her boyfriend's brand, The Museum Visitor, and by December, Matin Kim was firmly a brand known as a household name across the country, with their bags becoming increasingly inescapable on the street, leading to 10 billion won in annual sales in 2020 alone. This is what led to an investment of an undisclosed amount by Hago L&F for 60% of the brand, finalizing that in February 22nd, 2021. They would use this money to once again ignite a global expansion. Kim Da-in was to stay on as CEO, a new sales target of 50 billion won was penned, and by October, a new COO was hired by the way of Chae Min-sun, who had worked at Baba Fashion and Nice Club before this. New hit products, major pop-up locations, featured in major magazines, all followed. They may have missed their ridiculous sales target by quite some margin, hitting 15 billion in 2021, but undoubtedly, Matin Kim was taking over Korea. Their new showroom in Songsu, which is a location run sort of like Korea's Brooklyn, if Brooklyn was like a major tourist hub, became a hub for all of its fans and provided a space for fashion-conscious holidaymakers to discover it. They launched a new subsidiary called Matin Kim Essentials for even cheaper garments sold primarily on the Matin Kim logo, and within months, they were dubbed as the most successful women's clothing brand of the year. Success after success continued to follow, collab after collab. They even managed to get stocked in a multi-brand store in Toronto, which is known as a select shop in Korean, to meet their international goal. Matin Kim was unstoppable. By 2023, they started swimwear, they had a pop-up in Osaka that was wildly successful, and even began a cosmetics division called Magie du Matin, though that currently doesn't seem to be doing too well. I have a friend who works in Korean cosmetics, and I asked her, nobody that she knew nor worked with had ever heard of this brand, so I think there's potential there given how popular the brand is, but why it failed, I couldn't tell you because nobody that I know has even heard of it. However, soon would come yet another bump in the road when, thanks to a conflict with Hago L&F, Kim Da-in would leave the brand entirely. In fact, some sources say that she was fired. Either way, it was a huge blow for the brand. That was, quote, Matin Kim equals Kim Da-in. It's synonymous with the brand itself. She announced her exit in October 2023, and no one was named as a successor. The brand acquiesced to not being a designer name. Now it was fully known as just a high street brand. Fortunately for the brand, by this point it had grown to be so large within Korea that while it did impact the core fandom, some of whom moved over to Kim Da-in's new brand, the brand itself had moved on from being solely about her influencer impact. Now, Matin Kim had cultural impact. So the boat kept on chugging and chugging, biggering and biggering. They expanded into Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan on a permanent basis, hosted more pop-ups in Japan, sales only climbed within Korea, collaborations only increased, a second flagship store opened, then a standalone brick-and-mortar store in Hong Kong, then a plan for 27 more global stores, a plan that is continuing to this day. By 2025, the brand is bigger than ever. It's invested in so heavily into global expansion by this point that it is going to happen. They even had a Coach collaboration endorsed by Cat's Eye that's just gnarly. It saw Google searches surge 237% in America alone thanks to that one collaboration. At this point, if you haven't heard of Matin Kim, you're about to. The question therefore remains, do they have the creative ability to meet the new demand outside of these fandom searches? Thank you so much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more videos like this one. For beauty videos, do check out my beauty channel Underskin here, and a special thank you goes out to my patrons over on Patreon for their ongoing support. All content used in this video is done so in accordance with the principles of fair use. However, if you have any concerns, please contact me directly at contact@understitch.co.uk.